So without further ado, I am delighted to introduce Donna Freitas tonight to discuss the 9 lives of Rose Napolitano. And Donna will be in conversation tonight with author and editor Jill Santopolo. Hi, Donna.
Hi.
Hello. And hello, Jill.
Hello.
So for those of you that don't know, Donna is actually from Rhode Island, and this is her first adult novel. She's spoken at nearly 200 colleges and universities about her nonfiction work. She's the author of Consent, a memoir of unwanted attention, as well as 10 novels for children and young adults. Donna has written for the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Boston Globe, and she has appeared on a number of radio and TV shows. She has been a professor at Boston University and Hofstra University, and she is currently a member of the faculty at Fairleigh Dickinson University in their MFA program. And then we are also welcoming back Jill Santopolo tonight. We had a wonderful virtual event with Jill last month to celebrate the release of her latest book, Everything After. So be sure to check that out too. So Donna and Jill will speak for about 25 to 30 minutes, and then we will open it up to those audience questions. So I am about to disappear and let Jill and Donna take it away.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. And thank you, Donna, for letting me interview you for this event. I'm so excited because I love your book so much. And I guess actually before I get into my questions, do you want to just briefly tell everyone who is watching what The 9 Lives of Rose Napolitano is about?
Sure. I'm so excited to be here talking to you, Jill, too, and also to be doing an event for Savoy, which is pretty much my favorite bookstore. So, okay, so my book, for those of you who haven't stayed up all night reading it yet, if you don't have it yet, it's about a woman who doesn't want children. She's never wanted children, except her marriage has come to rest on whether or not she will change her mind. And so her husband has changed his. And so the book starts with a fight over prenatal vitamins, which feels like such a married fight to me, something small that becomes symbolic of the whole marriage. And they have the fight 9 different times, 9 different ways. And in some, the outcome is Rose has a baby, and in others, the outcome is she does not have a baby. And the book really covers, marriage, motherhood, career, friendship, family in general, divorce. And I think another really central part of the book is also the mother-daughter relationship between Rose and her own mother. I feel like that's one of the things that's at the heart of this book. And so I guess there's 3 generations of women in the book, because in the versions where Rose does have a baby, she has her daughter, whose name is Addie. And so you have, the daughter, then you have Rose, and then you have Rose's mother, who's also the grandmother. So I like that the book also spans generations. So that's my overview.
I love that there was just so much in your book. Like, I could have written 25,000 questions to ask you. So I really had to narrow it down. But if there's anything that I don't ask that the people watching are interested in, please use the Q&A button right down there and put your question in, and I will share it with Donna when I'm done asking her my questions. All right. So I'm going to start with one that I know everyone always wonders about with novels, which is, where did the ideas come from? Was there a real incident with vitamins?
There might have been a bit of an incident with vitamins, but the idea came from, I asked myself this question before I started writing the book, or when I was trying to decide what to write about. I asked what feels urgent to me. And as soon as I asked myself that question, I knew I want to write about a woman who doesn't want children, because I was one of those women, and it was a really complicated way to live. And so I thought it would make for a really interesting and kind of juicy novel. Just because I feel like a woman who doesn't want children is a predicament in and of herself, because everyone assumes you want them. And so as soon as you say no, people have all kinds of reactions to you. And so, that's an interesting situation for a novel. And I I did have an incident in my own life where I was supposed to be trying to change my mind about having children, and I had agreed, like Rose, to take these prenatal vitamins that my husband bought me, because I was supposed to be showing that I was trying to like make myself available for a child, and I really resented taking them. And we actually got in a fight about the fact that I wasn't taking them. And so when I was asking myself, where am I going to start this book? I was like, oh, I know. Like, it's going to start with those vitamins. Because even though it does seem like a dumb thing, it was really like, when we were talking about those vitamins, we were talking about our entire marriage. And so it felt like such a married thing. So yeah, that's, hopefully my ex-husband's not on here with the pseudonym.
I always say that writer brains to me are like blenders, and like all these things happen in your real life that kind of get thrown in the blender, but nothing that comes out is what went in. It's like it has the flavor of what went in, but it's not like exactly it.
Well, no, and I mean, when I tell my students, when I'm like teaching my MFA students or my creative writing undergrad students about, the idea that like, everything comes from experience. I feel like with fiction, it often starts with something that is yours. And so for me, it started with this argument about vitamins or my resentment about vitamins, but then, maybe that's what's yours, but then it really is fiction. Like the whole thing is just me imagining all these different possible lives that I could have had, or, that Rose, essentially through Rose, that I didn't have. And so, so I love the way that you can sort of start with something real and then go outwards, and just make the rest up. Yeah.
So given that you had the vitamin situation and that you and Rose were both sort of thinking about the idea of having children or not having children, how similar are you and Rose?
That's an interesting question. In a lot of ways, not similar at all. I think Rose is really gutsy, and I think she says and does all the things I would never dare, or that I didn't dare say. And so, I mean, one of the things that was really satisfying about writing Rose as a character is that she really expresses her anger, for better or worse. She makes a lot of mistakes, I think, or she does a lot of things that I think might have readers thinking like, don't do it, Rose, like this is a bad idea. But I think there's a way in which she lives her life in this very kind of courageous, daring way. And I don't know that I'm quite that courageous. The other thing I think is really different about Rose that's more, I guess, provokes longing in me is, so my mother died 18 years ago this June, and Rose gets to have all the conversations I never had with my mother.
That's awesome.
And so I really feel like so much of that is what I wished I could have had with my mother. If she were still around, the conversations I really would have wanted her to have. I had her react the way I would want my mom to react. And I also feel like, honestly, like the mother is a complicated character too, I think. She's certainly quite flawed, but I think in that way, Rose, what was that?
I said, but it's clear that she loves Rose. Yes,
it's clear that they both love each other, even though they kind of have tension. But I feel like Rose gets to have the relationship with her mother that I don't get to have. So
it's nice to be able to do that in fiction. Bring back people you want to bring back.
I know it is. It's one of the best parts of writing fiction. It's just, getting to, I said in an interview that I was doing that sometimes I feel like writing fiction is like talking to the dead, if you want. Mm-hmm. You get to sort of communicate with the people who aren't around anymore, like through your characters. I also grew up Catholic, and my mother was really good at talking to the saints. And one of the things that I've always loved about Catholicism, there's many things I do not love about Catholicism, but one of the things that I really loved was the fact that you're not only allowed to, but you're like supposed to talk to the dead.
Mhm.
And so sometimes I think that in books we get to do that. I'm sure you feel that way too, a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure. I feel like you get to bring conversations back, like you were talking about, things that you wish you had said or wish you had figured out at some point. Um, so speaking of conversations and relationships that you brought into your book, in addition to the mother-daughter relationships, it's a really powerful female cast. And not just because she has a great name, but I really love the relationship between Rose and her best friend Jill. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you wanted to convey about female friendships using them in this book.
Well, so actually the Jill that is in the book is a friend from Rhode Island who's on here.
That's awesome.
So I kind of like, well, it's not her, but like when I started writing the character, and I was like, I think I maybe had just seen this Jill, and I'm pretty sure that's true. I'm pretty sure Jill and I had breakfast. And then, I was writing the next, the best friend character, and I was just like, and her name is Jill. She's my friend Jill. So I often pull names from people who are just like around me at the time when I'm writing. So I don't know if you do that, but yeah, they have, Jill is one of the steady characters in Rose's life. And they are both academics. So Jill is a psychologist and a professor, so they're colleagues. And Jill really supports Rose in whatever version of Rose that she's in. Though she's also, well, I don't want to give anything away, but they really rely on each other. And I think when things begin to go wrong for Rose, Jill is like the person she turns to and is kind of her rudder, I think, in the book. So
it's one of those things someone had once said to me, that women have relationships with men, but that doesn't have to be necessarily the anchor relationship of your life. There are female friendships that you can also anchor yourself on if you want to. And
yeah.
I feel like Rose kind of does that here.
Well, I feel like in some ways Jill is also like Rose's sister. That one of the things I don't really think of myself as someone who competes with their friends. And one of the things that I realized I wrote into their characters was, so they're both academics, but they definitely don't compete with each other. Even though I feel like a lot of academics compete with each other, but they have a very non-competitive relationship, I guess, even though they work in sort of the same areas. So they have like a nice friendship. So
you're just talking about them working in academia, which you also do. So I was wondering how your job as a sociology professor, that's what you study, right? Sort of.
Well, I mean, I do sociological research.
There you go.
Very different than what Rose does, but yeah.
But how did that inform how you wrote this book? Your research?
Well, so my PhD is actually in postmodern feminist philosophy of religion, but as my academic life has progressed, I started doing sociological research. I just sort of decided I was going to do it. I did like a crash course in how to do interviews, and it's just become a big part of my life as an academic. But it's funny because when I was writing Rose, I thought like, oh, I'm going to pick someone who's not like me. So I gave her but something I know. So sociology, because I think of myself as this postmodern feminist philosopher person. And then I was like, oh, but it is kind of like me. But anyway, I think one of the things that was really fun about writing the part where she's a sociology professor was I thought of like a whole bunch of studies I wanted to do. Like I research a totally different area than Rose does, but she was like coming up with projects in the book. So I had to come up with projects that Rose could do. And one of the things I realized after I wrote the book was like, someday I'm going to do these projects. Like they're really good projects.
That's really amazing.
So they're kind of like in the corner in my brain, like at some point I'm gonna try to do one of them, I think. So that was actually a really fun part of the book. But I actually thought like she could get a grant maybe. I feel like if Rose came up with a proposal, she might get some grant money.
Yeah, totally. So you were talking earlier about how being a woman who doesn't want children is sort of not the expected in our society. And in addition to that, you write about other things that are topics that are kind of, I don't know if the taboo is the right word, but that people don't really talk about, like abortion, like miscarriage. And I was wondering why you think those topics are so taboo and what it felt like to write about them.
Well, yeah, Rose goes through a lot. I mean, there's 9 of her. So you can just imagine all the different things that a woman who is who doesn't want to get pregnant might go through, or one who's trying to get pregnant might go through, one who's getting pregnant might go through, and then one who's, of course, resisting it like the whole time. And so, Rose, I think, does things like she ends up in situations that she regrets, like here and there. And then she also ends up in situations where she's really happy. And I think it's really important to me that the book, I don't think the book is a polemic in the sense that she's a woman who doesn't want children and she's very open about that. But I also think this is a book that celebrates motherhood too. But I think I explored, miscarriage for her, and just her and her husband go through that together in very different ways. It's actually one of the things that provokes a lot of distance between them.
Mm-hmm.
As you might imagine, there's an abortion, I feel like, and there's affairs on both their parts. And I think a lot of these topics are we don't necessarily talk about, or we keep secret, or we feel like we're not supposed to talk about. And I also think we judge women so much for all the different things that they do. In some ways, if they become mothers, we judge them, right? We judge everything mothers do. I'm sure you know that. Like, people are always watching you. When you're pregnant, people are watching you and deciding like, oh, she shouldn't be having that half a glass of wine, like the pregnant woman over there. So I feel like women are always being watched, including if they're pregnant and they become mothers, and also if they're not. So it was really, I think one of the things that's wonderful about writing novels is novels are so generous. Like, I think of it as such a generous form because you get to take all the risks. You get to say all the things that you wouldn't necessarily dare. You get to give them all to your character, and you have all this space to accommodate all the different things that they might do. And so novels feel really exciting to me as places to push boundaries and to speak the unspeakable. So that's actually how I thought about writing my memoir. I thought the memoir was like this place where I could speak the unspeakable. And I sort of feel like that's what this novel is too.
So you're one of the rare writers who's successful both as a fiction writer and a nonfiction writer. So do you see one type of writing influence the other in your life?
Well, that's nice of you to say, Jill. So, yeah, I mean, I think they all affect each other. I definitely feel like all the skills I got from writing middle grade and young adult fiction are behind how I wrote the memoir. Like, there was a way in which all of the ways that I learned to build intensity, or just to be a storyteller, are in the memoir too, even though that is a memoir. It's it's nonfiction, and I feel like the same thing. They feel the same to me when I'm writing, in terms of maybe the urgency that I feel, or the way I kind of, on my first draft, I write really fast, and I think of it as like my playground draft. Like, I can do whatever I want. And so I feel like the first draft often feels that way. But for my nonfiction, like for my sociological work, that's like a whole other thing, because there's like endnotes and appendices and methodological sections. And, I'm really beholden. It's very careful. So whereas with like the memoir or with my novels, I feel like I just pour everything out and I like write super fast. With my nonfiction, I feel like it's like painstakingly like attention to detail, and it's like I'm using a different brain. So I have to like switch over to my nonfiction brain. And then when I'm done, it feels really exhilarating to then just make stuff up again.
Making stuff up is so much fun. Like,
Yeah, I love it.
we get to have imaginary friends for a living.
Yeah, we get to talk to the dead. We get to say all the things we wouldn't dare. We get to make all the mistakes. And then if we want, we can have a happy ending.
It's great. It's great. This is just a quick reminder to everybody that if you have a question, please put it in the Q&A box. If you had written something in the chat, but it's a question that you want Donna to answer, please switch it over to the Q&A box. I see there's one question right there. So, I'm guessing there are some more that people have. So stick them in there so that when I'm finished, I can ask them to Donna. Okay. So I always find the way that writers structure their novels to be really fascinating. And this novel has a really particularly inventive structure that, when I heard that it was about 9 different possible lives of this woman, I thought, how is Donna going to like do this? How are you going to read 9 lives? And you did it, and it's remarkable. So can you talk a little bit about the writing process? Was this always how it was structured? Where did it, what was the genesis of this?
Well, I didn't know at first that I was going to do these 9 different lives. I just knew I was writing about this woman. I knew her name was going to be Rose. And I sort of walked around the world, like thinking about it for a while, for like a few months, thinking, I want to write a book about a woman who doesn't want children. But which book will it be? Will it be the one where she has a child and then regrets it? Will it be the one where she doesn't have a child and then her life is terrible? Is it going to be the one where she has a child and is super happy? Like, I just had all of these different things I could imagine, and I couldn't decide which one to do. And then one day I was in a church, but not for church. I was in an event. I was actually in a lecture. And as I was listening to the lecture, which was about, oh my gosh, I feel like it was like the Aeneid. It was something like really, like early poetry. Anyway, so I was sitting there, and it just occurred to me, like, what if I wrote all the stories? And then I had like a piece of paper, because in theory I was going to take notes for the lecture. I started just writing, like, okay, life 1, like she's going to do this, and then she's going to do this, and I just wrote them all down. And then when I got home from that trip, I was like, okay, yeah, like I'm going to do this. I'm going to write all these stories. Like I'm going to break her into all of these different like versions. And it felt really exciting to me because I am terribly indecisive. And I'm always afraid I'm going to make a decision, like a big decision, and then regret it. And I thought, oh my gosh, like this is perfect. If only I could live my life this way, I can have Rose make all the decisions and live all the lives. And that was really thrilling. But there's also, I'm not going to give this away, but there's a puzzle-like quality to this book. And my favorite part of writing it was figuring out the end. And I wrote the end very early. I was maybe like 30 or 40 pages in, and I went ahead, I wrote the end, and then I thought, oh yeah, like I'm going to get there. I'm going to get to the end. I know how this is going to go. And so that felt really exciting. But you have to read the book and get to the end to know what I'm talking about.
That's so cool. I was actually going to ask you if you always knew how it was going to end, or if there were different endings, but it sounds like you did. That's really cool. All right, I'm going to ask one more of my questions, and then we'll go into the Q&A. So this is just another reminder. Put them in there, guys. Okay. So I've heard this said before, and I know it's true for me, that writers often come back to the same theme in a lot of their novels and nonfiction too, as if they're like trying to say something larger about that topic through all of their writing, like if you looked at it as a whole. So I've read a number of your books, and it struck me that you often come back to the theme of female sexuality. And I was wondering if there's if that's something that you have been wanting to say something about across your books, or sort of, I don't know what that brings up for you.
Well, I definitely write about that in my nonfiction work. So I write a lot about young women and sex in particular. I write about consent, Title IX, all those issues. And I've been doing that for, I don't know, like 18 years now. It's been a long time that I've been working in that area of research. And I think because of that, and because of I'm constantly having conversations with young women about this stuff, with young adults in general, but I'm often talking to young women in particular, all those like 200 gazillion, I don't even know how many they are now. It's probably like 250 like talks at colleges and universities are often involved. Like I often am sitting around talking to young women about what they're thinking about. And so I guess when I'm writing my books, I'm thinking about all of those issues. Because I'm always thinking about the questions that they're asking or the things that they're struggling with. And so I definitely feel like those conversations make their way into my books, or like those topics or the things that the young women in me think about. And sometimes like young women I meet on campus there's like actually a couple of them in Rose. They end up as like little tiny minor characters in my book. But I think, my background is in gender studies, and, I've always been asking questions about women's identity, women's decision-making, women's voices, the ways in which society shuts down women's voices or their choices, or, refuses to listen to them. And, that is definitely in my book. And I think it was, though on the topic specifically of sex, when we were working on this book, me and my editor, Pam, and my editor, Martha, who's in the UK, I think it was Martha, who, there's a couple sex scenes in the book. And one of them, in the margins, Martha, I think it was, wrote, like, I think this is the most depressing sex scene I've ever read. And then she was like, I love it. I was like, oh, thanks, Martha. So the award for the most depressing sex scene ever apparently goes to me.
You need a trophy. That definitely needs a trophy.
So you have a lot to look forward to. So.
All right, we've got a bunch of questions now, so I'm going to switch over there. Oh, that's so funny. So Yvonne asked, do you feel multiple of your works involve a central permeating theme, be it friendship or religious, spiritual influence, whatever it is you use?
Well, I would say the one I always think about is starting over. Like, I feel like a lot of my characters are in positions where they have to start over. And by that, I mean, like, something major has happened and their life has been upended, and then they have to go from there. Or like some sort of major identity shift has happened. And I feel like, okay, I did that 9 times with Rose. She has 9 major life shifts in her book. So I feel like that theme is definitely there in the book.
Definitely, yeah. All right, so now we have a question. It says it's from Daphne and also Elliot. So I think it's from Elliot, but it has Daphne's name on it also. But it says, wondering if Donna found herself rooting for any of the roses over the other roses.
Wait, what? Reading?
Like rooting for them, like cheering for one of the, yeah.
Well, hi, Elliot. In some ways, I feel like I'm definitely, yeah, there's definitely a rose or two in there. Especially, I feel like there are a couple of moments where Rose gets more confident. And, no, I'm rooting for Rose number 3. I'm rooting for Rose number 3. And also, Rose number 3. And then Rose, I think it's Rose number 1. I'm trying to remember. But the first, okay, there's the opening of the book where Rose has a baby. I'm not giving anything away, but then you switch roses, and I think we go to rose number 1, and I think I'm rooting for her quite a bit. So
Rose 1.
she has a rough go of it in the beginning, but then things get better for her. But I'm definitely rooting for her, and I'm also rooting for the roses that have children. Like I want them to be happy. Like I want Rose to, I don't want it to be a regret for Rose. So
I think that makes a lot of sense. So Elise Broach asked a few questions, one of which is a spoiler, so I'm not going to ask you that one, and a couple that I think we touched upon, but she asks also, what was the biggest change to the story in the revision process?
Oh, hi, Elise. The biggest change is because of my editor, Pam, and it's actually my favorite part of the book. It's, I think my favorite part of the book is the relationship with Rose and her mother. And in the first version of the book, so the book that Pam actually bought, there was a way in which Rose's mother kind of dropped out from the story without giving anything away. And Pam was like, no, like I want like Rose and her mom in the story. Like you gotta do this. And at first I was like, I don't know. Like I was kind of hesitant. And then I sort of let myself go there when I was doing the revision. And it turned out to be the most, like my favorite part of the book. And I think also because it was the book that, it was the part of the book that I think most needed as a person. Like it was where I poured all that wishing from my own mother that I don't get to have in my life, like into Rose and her mother. And like, I didn't let myself do that in the first drafts of the book. And so I don't know if Pam's here tonight, but thank you, Pam, for bringing that out of me. And yeah, it's my favorite part. So, but it was definitely not there in the first draft, not the way it is now.
It was a really powerful part. It was like a really powerful part of the book, I thought, Rose's relationship with her mother. Okay, anonymous attendee would like to know if you read more fiction or nonfiction.
Oh, I read a ton of both, but I do it depending on, so I'm always reading stuff. And I only generally read fiction in the afternoon. So I often have certain books I read in the afternoon. They're my afternoon evening books. And those are the books that I might read with like wine or in bed. And I often like to read like fantasy novels in the afternoon or mysteries. But in the morning, I'm generally reading like contemporary fiction. Or if I'm working on a nonfiction project, I read only nonfiction in the morning. So I read whatever it is that I'm trying to gear up to deal with, like to write. So if I'm writing fiction, I read fiction. But if I'm writing nonfiction, I sort of have to like put a moratorium on reading fiction, because if I read fiction, I'll stop wanting to write my nonfiction. I'll start wanting to write fiction. So it's like it messes up my brain. So I switch back and forth.
That's really fun.
Only fiction in the afternoon and often fantasy.
I love it. Cheryl Klein would like to know what one thing is that you're particularly proud of in this book.
Thanks, Cheryl. I am really proud of the writing, actually. I worked really hard on the writing of this book, and not that I memorized some of the reviews, but Publishers Weekly and their really amazing review, they said the writing was precise. And I was like, yes, it was. Like I worked so hard on all those sentences. But I'm really proud of the writing, and I think I'm proud of the structure of this book. It felt like a giant math problem to work on, and but it also felt like I feel like this is the book of my heart. Like I really wrote a book of my heart, and I said all these things I didn't think I could say, and that felt really good.
Eve Gleichman would like to know, who would you say you wrote this book for?
Oh, well, thanks, Eve. That's a good question. I definitely wrote it for me. Like, I felt like I needed to get all this out. Like, it felt like an unburdening of a lot of stuff that I carried around for a long time in my life. But I really I think of that we write, or I write to connect.
Mm-hmm.
And like I write to talk to people. I just said yesterday, actually, to a friend of mine, I was talking about how one of the things that has been really miraculous to me about having written this memoir that came out a year and a half ago was that it's about a part of my life that I could never really fully talk about, or it was really hard for me to talk about in conversation. For a really long time, I thought no one ever would know this part of who I was. And now, because of the memoir, people know that part of me. And it's just so shocking to feel like I'm not alone in it anymore. And I also feel like books, writing a novel or writing this novel, it's also like talking, to your friends, your friends who read it, but also all these people who you don't know. Mm-hmm. And so there's a way in which you get to, a novel becomes a conversation, and it provokes conversation, but it also, I definitely feel like I know that writing makes me feel less alone. And I also think reading makes us feel less alone. And I hope that this book is able to represent some of the things that maybe people feel alone in, or I thought a lot about how I don't really have any books that I read about women who don't want children. It's really hard to find those books, unless they're the woman in the attic, or the unhappy spinster, those women. But what about just a woman who's not up in the attic? so anyway, I hope that I wrote for those women, and also women who've made different choices than I have. Yeah.
Spinning off of that, Lauren Huss, I think is how you say that last name. I'm not sure. Wants to know if you think society will ever stop judging women who don't want children.
Well, if only they would. I actually I wrote a piece for the UK publisher had asked me to write a piece about not wanting children. And one of the things that I said was really hard about that is that, you could talk to your partner over and over again and say, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do this, and they can agree and all of that. And then you get married and you realize oh, it doesn't really matter that you and I agreed on this, because the entire world is conspiring against us. And they're going to try to make us change our minds. And so I was really stunned by the things that people said, and the really unbelievably awful things. And so just the enormous pressure we were under to have a baby was just shocking to me. And I wonder if that will ever change. I do wonder what's going to happen with COVID. One of the things I've been wanting to write about is because of COVID, right? Women are leaving the workforce. We've figured out that women still do all the childcare, even if they're working full time. They're homeschooling their kids essentially, and everything has just fallen to women, as though the last 60 or 70 years of feminism didn't happen. And I really wonder, with the generation right now who's in college and are in their early 20s, I wonder if that's going to affect how they think about this question, and if they actually think about it as a question or a choice. The idea that is motherhood finally going to become a choice because of what we've just lived in the pandemic and how it's affected women.
I think it should always be a choice, the way anything in life is a choice.
But it's not. People, right. It's not. People assume, and then if you say no, then they assume either you can't have children or, right. So they make all kinds of assumptions. So.
Okay, so Mariana would like to know how much the structure changed from the first draft to what you showed to readers. Wait, from the first draft you showed to readers, was it difficult to figure out which scenes to put where and where the stories would converge?
I think the structure didn't change that much. I mean, what was interesting about the form is that you could kind of, it was pretty easy to move chapters around, actually. Like I kind of had like a formula for it. Like, okay, like this certain rose is going to be here and then this is going to go there. Like I had the arc in my head. And one of the things I loved about the form was because I think it spans about 25 years. So it spans a lot of time. And you get like you get Rose over the course of all those years, but you get different versions of Rose over the course of all those years. And so I had a lot of time to play with. And if there was something I wanted to get at, I could sort of put in a chapter in the timeline. Like so it was like a roomy book to write. There were ways in which I could address something I wanted Rose to be dealing with without too much trouble. Though I don't know if my editor would agree or if the copy editor would agree. but I really liked that. It felt very flexible as a structure.
All right, we have our last question, which is from Yvonne Hollins Peterson, which says, do you find that when you let your guard down and allow vulnerability, it produces a better quality of writing and also a better experience for the reader?
That's a wonderful question. Well, I do think, I mean, I tell my students this, my writing students, that, you know, vulnerability is required. And, you know, when you're writing anything really, but when you're writing fiction, and I think what you are doing, even though it's fiction, is you're revealing yourself. Like you are revealing the most intimate thoughts that you have and you're giving them to your character. And I think the more you're really able to humble yourself to that, the more oomph your book is going to have. Like the more you're going to be able to give your characters, the more layered they'll be, the more emotion there'll be. And I think you have to feel the emotion that your characters are feeling when you're writing. Like I often think of writing in the morning is kind of like acting, like in the, you know, I don't know if you think of this too, Jill, but like it's like I get up in the morning because I write in the morning and I have to like get into character and I have to let myself sort of be this person and then, you know, present her on the page. And I think that really requires us to open ourselves up to the people that we're writing and to the experiences that we've never had that we're writing, which is why there's a relationship between writing and empathy, both with, you know, the writer, him or herself, or themselves, and also the reader too. Like connect, and connection is vulnerability. So yeah, but
Absolutely. So beautifully said. Thank you so much for answering all of my questions and everyone else's questions. And thank you everyone else for coming tonight, and Savoy for hosting us.
For doing this, and for everyone who came tonight. This was so nice, and for all the wonderful questions. I'm so glad that we got to do this, and I'm so glad we got to do this with Savoy. So thank you.
And now Steph. So we'll leave.
Hello, everyone. This has been a great event. What a wonderful conversation. I have to say too that I really appreciate how you have different kind of genres that you read throughout the day, depending on the time of day. I feel like that suits a lot of mindsets and moods. So that's great. I have popped the link to the book in the chat a couple of times, and I will do it one more time here. So feel free to check that out. I know that Bank Square and Savoy both have quite a few copies in stock and ready to be picked up or shipped out as soon as possible. So thank you so much, Donna, for this book, and thank you for sharing in this conversation with us tonight. And also huge thanks to Jill for moderating, and thanks to everybody for watching. This was great.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone.